As a leader, one of the most tempting things I feel is the need to do it all. You're probably like that too. We put this enormous pressure on ourselves to accomplish more today than we did yesterday. I want to earn more than I did last year, and somehow along the way, we want to be present and available in all of our personal relationships. But something has to give. Doing it all is a myth. Doing it all is a terrible myth in leadership. In fact, the best leaders are the ones who know their limits, operate in their strengths, and set others up around them to do the same. If you want to find that kind of freedom, Belay can help. See, Belay pairs busy leaders with highly vetted, US-based virtual assistants to save them from the administrative slog and to get that leader back to working on the things that matter most. To help you get started, Belay is offering Maxwell Podcast listeners a free download of their ultimate guide to working with a virtual assistant. This resource has everything you need to get started, to start growing, and to succeed with your new virtual assistant. Just text Maxwell to 55123 to download this resource today. That's MAXWELL to 55123. All right, like me, let's get ready to accomplish more and juggle less with Belay. Welcome to the Maxwell Leadership Podcast. Our podcast is committed to adding value to leaders who multiply value to others. My name is Mark Cole, and today we're continuing a two-part series on momentum. Now, I have to tell you, if you've missed last week, I probably would pause, go listen to last week, and come back and pick us up right here. Because in this series, John Maxwell teaches us 10 momentum breakers and momentum makers that will help you create the momentum in your own leadership, in your own life, in your own relationships, and dare I say, with the team that you lead. Last week, John covered points 1 through 5. So this week, he'll cover 6 through 10. Now, after John's lesson, my buddy, my coworker, my co-leader, Chris Godey, and I are going to continue a conversation of putting this lesson into practical application for you. We're going to dive deeper into John's lesson, and we're going to challenge you to lead with better momentum. If you'd like to watch this episode on YouTube, or maybe even download the free bonus resource for this episode, visit maxwellpodcast.com/momentum maker. Now, as I said last week, it's said again this week. Now, to one of the best momentum makers I've ever met. Here is John Maxwell.
Number 6, momentum breaker is apathy. Momentum maker is passion. You see, momentum is developed when passion is at the center of your life, and momentum is drained when apathy is at the center of your life. I have come to believe that if you have courage, you will influence people based on your convictions. If you lack courage, you will influence people based on your comfort zone. Let me ask you a question. Are you influencing people based on your comfort zones, or are you influencing people based upon your convictions? One person with passion is greater than 99 who have no interest. Momentum breaker number 7, dishonesty. Momentum maker, character. I learned a long time ago, momentum is developed when the followers trust their leader, and momentum is drained when followers distrust their leader. Let me give you my favorite character quotes. I went through about 150 of them to give you these 10. Number 1, what you are determines what you see, and what you see determines what you do. If you follow that equation all the way out, what you do is a result of what you are. Always has been, always will be. Number 2, character is the sum total of our everyday choices. The choices that you have, the choices that I have. Character is the sum total of our everyday choices. Number 3, a person never discloses his own character so clearly as when he describes another person. Number 4, this is a Beecher quote. A person is rich according to what he is, not according to what he has. Number 5, some men succeed by what they know. Some men succeed by what they do. A few succeed by what they are. Number 6, most of the significant things done in the world were done by persons who were either too busy or too sick. There are few ideal and leisurely settings for the disciplines of growth. Teddy Roosevelt said it another way, which is number 7. 90% of the work done in this country is done by people who don't feel well. Isn't that right? Aren't those great character quotes? Number 8, this is a Covey quote. You've heard this one, I'm sure. Private victories precede public victories. If you haven't had any private victories in your life, you aren't going to have any public ones. Number 9, cowardice asks the question, is it safe? Consensus asks the question, is it popular? Character asks the question, is it right? Number 10, ability may get you to the top, but it takes character to keep you there. And I believe that with all of my heart. The 8th momentum breaker in an organization is conformity. Doing what everybody else is doing because everybody else is doing it. Momentum makers, though, a momentum maker is change. You see, momentum is developed when change helps growth, and momentum is drained when conformity hinders growth. Kennedy said, conformity is the jailer of freedom and the enemy of growth. Let me do a little Greek on you. The word nostalgia is derived from 2 Greek words. 1, to return home, and 2, a painful condition. And if there has been no sense of loss and no resistance, there has been no change. Momentum breaker number 9 is ingratitude. And momentum maker is giving, or gratitude, or grace. You see, momentum is developed when a spirit of giving fills the organization, and it's drained when an ungrateful spirit fills the organization. Quoting your notes, Anne Frank said, how wonderful it is that nobody need wait a single moment before starting to improve the world. Don't need to wait a bit. Momentum breaker number 10, indecision. Momentum maker, action. You see, momentum is developed by taking the risk and moving ahead even when there are significant obstacles that remain, and momentum is drained by succumbing to the paralysis of analysis. Creative abstract thinking is another ability that is often found in leaders. They're prone to get somewhere in their minds long before their followers do. In my view, this ability is mostly innate. But the capacity to do something with an idea is what distinguishes a leader from others. We ought to adopt, and this is in your notes, this as our motto of life: the water does not flow until the faucet is turned on. How many people I know go to the kitchen sink and wonder why the water doesn't flow? Turn that sucker on. Nothing is great of an idea until we act on it. So what I did is I put some of my favorite action quotes in here. Let me give you some action thoughts, such as, you don't have to be great to start, but you have to start to be great. Number 2, some people dream of worthy accomplishments while others stay awake and do them. Number 3, here's a great quote by John Holcomb. You must get involved to have impact. No one is impressed with the one lost record of a referee. Anybody who brags about what he's going to do tomorrow probably did the same thing yesterday. Number 6, a person is never what he ought to be until he is doing what he ought to be doing. I want to tell you something. I am really never impressed with idea people. I really am not. And anyone, again, that takes a long shower can get a good idea. What I'm really impressed is with a person who has the tenacity and discipline to take the idea and put it into action. I have learned, and let me just stop here long enough before I finish this lesson with you. I have learned to be an implementer. I am a major implementer. I want to tell you what, when I hear people talking and it's a good idea, while they're sitting over there discussing the whys, the hows, the whens, and the wheres, I'm over the corner with my legal pad. and I'm getting ready to put it in action. Now, the reason I know that is because I learned a long time ago, watch this, that there are a lot of smart people in the world, so I'm not always going to have the best ideas. So I decided to be smart and quick. And I learned a long time ago, it's the quick that gets you to the top, not the smart. There is nothing more common than geniuses on the shelf of life. But it's the person that takes the idea and does something with it. The higher a person's influence, the greater the momentum will be broken or made. And when followers break momentum, it hurts. And when leaders do it, it sometimes is fatal.
Hey, podcast listeners. Many of you listening right now would probably love the autonomy that comes with owning your own business or becoming a coach that helps other businesses succeed. Well, we have a phenomenal strategy where you are 100% in control of your own business, earning income on your own terms, and have access to the people, tools, and resources you need to build a thriving leadership development business. When you become a Maxwell Leadership Certified Team member, you join a global community of entrepreneurs led by our expert team of mentors and faculty, including John C. Maxwell. You'll also get one of the top leadership certifications in the world next to your name, giving you the boost you need to get started. Visit us online at maxwellleadership.com/join the team to find out more.
Hey, welcome. I want to get right in because when Chris shows up, guys, he's back 2 weeks in a row, and I'm just really, really excited about it. But when he shows up, we have so much talk. We work together so much and have worked together for so long, Chris, that, boy, talking about any subject from a point of application, we've heard John probably as much as anybody because you traveled with him forever. I've traveled with him forever, and now we apply it on a day-to-day basis. So I want to jump right in because this is so good. So last week, 5 momentum makers, 5 counter momentum breakers. This week, 5 more, and I can't wait to talk to you more about it.
I love it. And leaders, the responsibility of creating momentum is yours, right? And Mark talked about it in the opening, personally, professionally, whatever it might be, it's on you to create that momentum. As we were listening, just so you know, what we do is we get the chance to, right before we record, Jake turns the lesson on, we listen, you react, and then we go. And during us listening to the lesson, Mark literally was like, oh my gosh, that is amazing. We got to talk about that. So I'm going to go right to the show notes. And I want to direct you to go to the show notes. We're going to start right here where John starts at number 6, where he says the momentum breaker is apathy and momentum maker is passion. And the 2 things that really stood out to Mark that I want to bring to your attention, that we're going to dive in to some personal application for Mark, is the question he poses where he says, are you influencing people based on your comfort zone, or are you influencing people based on your convictions? Now, if you don't have the show notes, I want you to pause, rewind. I want you to write that sentence down, and I want you to go think on that. Because I know the way you reacted, I kind of glanced over it, to be honest with you, and then I heard you and I looked and I was like, oh, I got to think about this. Yep. Like, I got to think, am I just leading? Am I just trying to create momentum because I've done this for a while? Or am I really convicted about it, right? Is that really where I'm at and what my calling is on life, which we're going to get to in just a minute. Yep. Then right after that, he says, one person with passion is greater than 99 that have no interest. I have worked for one of those 99 in the past. I think we all have, right? Yeah. And I'm like, what am I doing here? Like, they're not interested, so I'm not interested. So there's no momentum. We're going to talk about 180 degrees different than that. We're going to talk about your passion, right? Because I know, and the people that are watching on YouTube or listening, they know what your calling is, and they know that you're extremely passionate about it. And when we talk about your convictions and you lead with that passion, it is a double whammy for those that have ever been in the room or on the other side of it. And oftentimes, you've had to tell us, hey, guys, listen, I want to make sure you understand. I'm convicted by this. This is my calling. We're going to create momentum, and I'm going to do it because of the passion I have for what we're doing. And then you say, make sure you don't mistake my passion for the intensity. Yeah. You often say to us, hey, don't mistake my passion for intensity. Because when we're on the receiving end of it, you probably look at us and you can read a room really well. You're probably like, they're all about to walk out of the building right now because they think I'm coming, right? And we talked about last week, even being critical, right? Intensity and critical could come together. Talk to us a little bit about how you've had to temper that at times, but also, man, like that's how you create momentum. Again, I've seen you do it with teams, saw you do it earlier in the week, and you're just like, you guys are going to hear from me and my passion, my calling, and out of that room creates momentum. So just give us a little bit of lens behind your leadership and the power of that, but also how you've had to temper that a little bit at times too for momentum's sake.
To understand me and to understand the perspective that I'm going to answer your question, you got to know, Chris, when your team, we've got a team of highly trained, highly gifted coaches, facilitators that go out and train companies.
Right.
I mean, it's a part of our business. One of our exercises is the values exercise. It's a deck of about 40 plus cards.
Great exercise.
And you have to distill down these 40 cards first to the values that speak to you, the values that don't, then the top 10, then the top 5, and then you narrow it down. Everybody needs to understand from day one, maybe in my mother's womb, from day one, I've known passion is in my top 5. I think anything worth doing is worth doing with passion. I love that. So just know that I really talk about that, but I oversubscribe to passion at times, and that's the problem. Because oversubscribed passion is intensity, and people can't handle your intensity even if they're passionate about the same things because they can't tell if you're happy, sad, mad, glad. They don't know what it is because your intensity will sometimes overwhelm people. Now, trust me, some of you out there listening and watching the podcast, you need to get a dose of intensity. We wonder if you care. In fact, you mentioned this a while ago. Have you ever worked for a leader that you cared more about their performance than they cared about it?
Right.
That is a miserable experience.
Yeah.
But when we talk, Chris, and what gave me, it almost gave me chill bumps when John says, I prefer one person with passion more than 99 without passion.
Yeah.
And that is because when we begin to understand the importance of our work, the importance of our influence, there should awaken something within us. In every leader that's a servant-based leader that's about making the people around her or him better, there's something that should awaken in us and stir us to go do something with passion. Here's where we get into a little bit of trouble. Now, we're talking about a demotivator or a momentum breaker being apathy, okay? Don't care, whatever happens, whatever goes. Whatever, it'll be good. Everything will work itself out and feels no responsibility to work it out. Oh, my goodness. Drives me crazy. But here's what John says. This is what really struck me in this point. John says that consistency compounds.
Yeah.
In fact, he says one of the most desirable traits in a leader is a leader that is consistent. And often people get no change, status quo, average, and consistent confused. That's not what we're talking about.
That's right.
Consistency is not predictability. In the sense of passion, you need to be passionate about your conviction. You're a guy, man. Podcast family, he looks good, doesn't he? Losing weight, looking good. And I'm being dead serious about that. Man, this has been a long time where you changed your eating habits, you changed your workout habits, you changed what you said no to. The consistency looks good because you have been passionate about being consistent. Don't get confused with apathy and consistency. Don't get confused with comfort zone and consistency. Consistency does compound, but consistency without passion is not effective.
Yeah.
And we as leaders want to look for effective. You need to even be passionate in your consistency. I remember training, and I'll be really quick here. I remember training for my first 2 or 3 marathons. Every day I'd come in and say, yeah, I killed that 5 miles. Oh yeah, I ran 7 miles today. Oh man, that was it was so hard to run that. The passion was as much for me to get consistency as it was to inspire some other people to come run a marathon with me. Don't confuse apathy and consistency. Don't confuse consistency with comfort zone. You need to be consistent with passion.
Yeah. And I love that the clarification you just had right there. And the reason I was thinking about it, why I wanted to pull this out of you today is I think that oftentimes when you think about this, people can take intensity and it, to your point, be a demotivator.
Yep.
And you're very clear with us. And I wanted people to understand that it's not one or the other. To Mark's point, you probably have a little bit of it. Just be aware of it, and you're aware of it in your leadership, and you're able to communicate like, no, this is my passion. And now that we understand that as working together on a team, we all feel that. And what does that do? Then that creates momentum. So I love that John talked about that there in number 6. Let's go now to number 8 that he talks about. The word change. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes in organizations or your personal development, whatever that might look like, change is not easy. And but you have to have it in order to continue to grow. And then I would say you have to have it to create momentum. And we were talking recently, and you and I were discussing certain situations, and you're like, hey, we need to create a little bit of change here in order to drive momentum. We've got to be able to do that, to be able to avoid a little bit of regression. But that takes an impact and a toll on the team. And so people are like, well, the first thing that comes up when people will go through change is, how does that affect me? And all of a sudden, does that slow down their momentum? Your view and your vision on that as a leader is no, we've got to do that periodically then to continue to drive momentum and not just stay the status quo, ho hum, this is what we've done. So just talk to us a little bit about that and the importance of you in leading and driving that to keep momentum going.
You and I both, Chris, have worked on a team to where conforming was expected. They wanted to protect yesterday's systems or yesterday's processes. What happens with conformity is conformity breeds this sense of entitlement, the sense of, well, if I do what I did yesterday, I'll get the same results. Now, number one, you don't want the same results as yesterday. We're a growth environment. There are organizations, and perhaps even you're working on a team, that they would just be happy with yesterday's results. They're just pleased. There's not this drive. I would challenge you, even if you're happy with yesterday's results, it was productive enough, it was profitable enough, it was effective enough that even doing what you did yesterday will not breed yesterday's results.
Agree.
Because conformity begins to build this sense of entitlement. Well, I know it'll happen because it happened before. And when you get into this concept that you don't need to constantly be challenging yourself, I will tell you, you're not in danger of stagnation. You're in danger of retreat, of diminish.
Yeah.
Because the sameness does not breed the same results.
Right.
The sameness actually gets a mindset of expectation that I don't need to challenge myself or create myself. I think that's why John counters conformity with change.
Yeah.
John says the only guarantee that a better tomorrow is going to happen is growth/change today. Why he can say that after 77 years of life, after 55 years of pursuing expert thought around leadership, is because he realizes the only way that you're going to become better is when you change something about what you're doing today. Now, some of us, I could be guilty of this, we think that gives us an excuse to change everything every day. And then it goes back to the point I was just making, Chris, there is no consistency with that. I would tell you that my greatest challenge today, as I step into leadership meetings, as I did recently, my greatest challenge is to make sure that the change that is happening to me personally is not an expectation of the same change that's happening to other people around me. And we get too caught up. That comes back to what you said a while ago. Yeah. Where I get into trouble with my passion, which becomes intensity, is when I expect people to feel about my message the same way I feel about it. And the intensity begins to be overbearing, as my 18-year-old daughter now tells me I am. The change, the expectation becomes intensity, and people go, if it takes that much passion and that much energy, I don't know if I'm able to do it. And so people check out before they ever checked in.
100%.
And we don't want that.
Right.
And that's why I'm so glad you pulled out that intensity. But you've got to be passionate about enough change that the team doesn't become entitled.
Yeah.
So not as much change as the leader's going through. Leaders see more and before. John says that. They should change more and before too, by the way. So I don't expect people to change at my pace, but I better have them to expect a pace of change.
I love that. That's great.
And that's our big challenge.
Yeah, I love that. It's a great statement. I was actually, while you were just talking, this is what I was thinking about in regards to that pace of change, is that those that are listening to the podcast that have been fans of ours, that download it, that share it with their teams and talk about it, you're changing. And by the way, your personal growth journey is creating change that's creating momentum. And that's what John's talking about. That's the example you brought out about him chasing that leadership over time, chasing change. You didn't want to conform to one way of doing things. And by the way, that has created a lot of momentum for him, for Maxwell Leadership, for us, for those that he's impacted around the world, because he chose to change personally. The other thing I want to say about that is when we're talking about creating momentum, I love your example about, hey, leaders, if you have the privilege to lead a team, don't expect them to be moving at the change that you are. You should be going first. You should be growing faster, to Mark's point. But what I want you to understand is when you share what you're learning and you're growing through that change like you do with our team, with our organization, that creates momentum. So there's lots of, this is a really deep point right here that I think you could really unpack many, many different ways and understand the fact that when change is said, a lot of people have a negative connotation about it. But if we break it down into its simplest form, you're listening to this podcast today because you're willing to change. And by the way, I have a feeling that's going to create some type of momentum in your life because you decided to do that.
Change is not natural, not even for leaders.
No.
Because change is natural for me to want to have for you, Chris, because right now I have this role of casting the vision. I want you to change. Let's go do this, like this, be excited about this. But when I'm having to change my stuff or somebody, John Maxwell, is asking me to change, nobody likes somebody else's idea of change.
Yeah.
So get over yourself. That's natural. But what we've got to do is challenge ourselves. Am I in an environment that is requiring me to change? It's why last week I got super passionate. I was talking about Jesse Cole. You'll remember the care team that you put around. Go back and listen to it. But when I was done with that, I said, we've got to get our podcast family to understand they need to invest in change environments that's going to make them better. And leaders, I'm just going to tell you, whether you're watching on YouTube, whether you're listening, you need to invest in an environment this year. You still have 5 months. This year, invest in yourself and invest in an environment that will challenge you to change. You'll lead better. One environment that we do is a 2.5-day dive deep with John Maxwell and only about 110 other people in Austin, Texas. And we want to invite you out to Exchange, podcast family. I want you to be there. I want you to be one of the 120 that's going to be in the room. Chris, just one little reminder step on that, and then tell them how to go find more information on that.
Yeah, I love this event every year. We'll be on a waiting list. It's one of John and Mark's favorite events. Very intimate. And it's really about how this year's going to be about leading through change. What does that look like? We're going to bring some speakers in, and we're going to talk about that. Kendra Scott. We're going to talk about, Daryl Eves is going to talk about how do you use and innovate technology and YouTube and strategy around growing your business. And we're going to do some Austin experiences. I'm going to leave it at that. We always like to have a little bit of fun with that. So we're super excited, but that's an environment. And you and John, you called it exchange.
Yeah.
Right? We're exchanging ideas and experiences so that you will then go change, by the way, which will then create momentum.
Yeah. So give us the website.
Yeah. MaxwellLeadership.com/exchange. And you can fill out a form. Our team will follow back up.
And we'll put that in the show notes for those of you that are driving right now.
Next point, you and I both know that this is one area of John when it comes to making decisions and taking action. By the way, let me just pause for a minute. Mark just blew right by, and I don't think he's told our podcast family that his daughter of 18, she has a lot of thoughts around how Mark creates momentum in his leadership. We're not going to talk about that, although the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree, so we'll leave it there.
Yeah.
But congratulations, even though this is very hard for me to say.
Oh, Lord. You're going to put this on podcast.
I'm putting it out there because you made choices when my kids made choices to announce it, and I feel like you owe this. We live here in Atlanta. We are Bulldog fans, and Mark Cole's daughter, I'm not sure if this is creating momentum. I think it's breaking momentum. Chose to attend the University of Florida.
The University of Florida.
The Gators, but congratulations.
Thank you. She had a chance to go to UGA. All of my Gator friends, I love you. In fact, I'm one of you. I'm in the tribe now.
Yeah, you are.
My money is going
there. Yeah.
But she had a chance to go to UGA, which you and I have grown up and loved all her life. She had a chance to come be with your son who's playing football at Georgia Tech. She had she had a scholarship to go to
Talented girl.
Georgia Tech.
Yes. And she goes to the games.
Yes, she did, but she's got good reasons. So
that's right. So I just want to take a minute because
okay,
I was thinking about decisions, and she made a pretty quick decision, right? You tried to walk her through that process.
Yeah.
You did a really good job. But when it comes to creating momentum and making decisions, man, John, there's nobody better that we've seen John do that. And when we've sat back and we've watched him, sometimes we go, whoa, that was a little bit too fast. And I love his illustration. He's like, I'm over in the corner. That's a true story, by the way. And then what he'll do is take that yellow pad of paper and he gives it to Mark and says, here's where we're going.
Yes.
And people are still sitting there listening to the speaker. But when you do that, right, it gives you that competitive advantage. And he tells some great stories around that, allows you to capitalize on some opportunities personally and professionally. I think it also reduces uncertainty because you make that decision and you go. And so it creates quick wins, all those things. And you and I both tend to be a little bit more of a processor. We'll talk about this in a minute. How have you developed your leadership, your personal growth, your professional growth, the organization, Maxwell Leadership's growth, into making quicker decisions? And how do you manage that in order to take action right away to create momentum? And just give us some examples of what that's looked like in your leadership.
You know, I got to go full disclosure on this, okay?
Okay.
One of the things I love when I go out and I meet the podcast family, and it's hardly a room I don't go in now that somebody doesn't come up and say, hey, thank you for what you said there. They love the podcast. I was just in some rooms this past week, a little while ago, that we were doing, and people said, I came in and I'm a part of this event because I knew you were going to be here in the podcast. I'm always honored with that. But then here's what they say. Thanks for being so vulnerable. What they're really saying is thank you for not having a podcast personality that doesn't give us hope because you make so many mistakes, right?
Yeah.
So full disclosure, I went back after John was done teaching today and I was listening here in studio. I went back and looked at every momentum maker and breaker.
Good idea, yeah.
All 10 of them. And I went back and looked, and in full disclosure, I've got to tell you, this is the one I struggle with the most. Now, I think you or I, one's going to give them an exercise before we end today and maybe challenge you to do the same thing. But I've got to tell you, this is my biggest challenge because I find big decisions impossible for me to make. Almost impossible. Let me say it like that. John Maxwell would be proud that I've moved off of impossible. Almost impossible for me to make until I have a peace that it's the right decision. Now, I don't mind the right decision turning out wrong. I don't mind the right decision coming and biting me in the butt. I honestly don't mind any of that. But I have to start it out with a peace. John's peace is that he's moving and it'll come to him.
He wrote it down and handed it to you.
On the way.
That's his peace.
Exactly right. He's told me this. We've had this conversation long and hard. He is at peace because he's going to find out if it's right rather than knowing whether it's right. And I get a peace that I know it's right for today. I could care less if it fails tomorrow. But I got to know that it's the right decision to make today. And John says, you got to get peace in action, not in indecisiveness.
Yeah.
And oftentimes I have to remind my team, I am not as indecisive as you think I am. I am actually getting peace that we're moving in the right direction. I'm not proud of that, nor sad about that. It works for me. But to be more like my mentor, John, I'm going to tell you that I realize that a momentum breaker of indecision or pause or patience or wait has the ability to slow everybody down when really everybody's amped and wants to run. And so I will tell you this, I'm working on it. That's what I'm going to tell you. I'm going to tell you it's the hardest momentum breaker maker. I'm going to be honest with you that. But now let me talk about John Maxwell. He said something the other day, and I told you this, I think, before last week's show. He said something to me the other day. He said, Mark, I am not scared of what I find out. I'm not scared of knowledge.
That's a great statement.
And he said, I'm not scared that I don't know something. I'm not scared of what I find out when I do know something. What I'm scared is I am not pursuing finding out. He said, I don't care. I'm not scared about knowledge. I'm not scared about that I don't know something, so I got to go get the knowledge. I'm scared that I will find myself one day not pursuing finding out. Chris, when I told you that, you did exactly what you just did there because we've been around him a long time. I've never heard him articulate that. Here's what he's saying. I am more passionate about action toward wins or losses than I am about whether I know it's going to be a win or a loss before I start. It's brilliant.
It's brilliant.
It is.
And I love that you share that example because I hadn't heard it. I heard you say it last week. I didn't write it down. This week I just wrote it down because that is an extremely strong statement and shows his DNA around this. What I love about what you shared is there are people that are listening, that are watching us. They sit on both sides of the camp. And so we're not encouraging you to go from where you're at to making hasty decisions and make mistakes. Mark has a process and he's trying to refine that process and get a little bit quicker because John says right here, man, nothing happens of an idea. Nothing happens great of an idea until you take action on it. And I'm gonna close and I'll throw it back to Mark with this one illustration that may be an exercise that you can actually do. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna give you two. Number one is I want you to go through these 10 that John gave us over the last 2 weeks. So there was 6 through 10 today. If you missed 1 through 5, I want to encourage you to go back to last week's. You don't want to miss that one. And then I want you to take all of them and I want to do exactly what Mark did. He just modeled it for us. He said, hey, when I look back over the 10, this is the one that I feel like may be the one that is stopping momentum, that is breaking the momentum of my growth, my team's growth. What do you think about that? So what we want to encourage you to do is say, hey,
love that. Give
this to your team and say, hey, of these 10 things, where am I breaking momentum of this team of what we're trying to accomplish? And let them give you feedback. Yep. And I'd encourage you to look at it yourself as well, but don't tell them your answer until you get theirs back.
I love that.
Because then you want to look at the gap. I'm going to close with this one. You gave me an exercise one time that was extremely powerful. Mark and I are very closely aligned in how we lead, how we make decisions. And so when Mark was telling you, it was mine too, right? I'm like, my wife, she makes decisions and fires before she even aims. And yes. And then she's like, God, what did we do? I'm the opposite. I aim, and then I miss the opportunity. And she's like, what did you do? Okay, that's a whole nother podcast for Mark and I to talk about. You came into my office one time and you're like, man, why are you not moving on that? Like, what's taking you so long, decision? And you said, here's what I want you to do. And this is a great exercise, very practical. When an opportunity comes, a decision needs to be made, whatever it is, he said, I want you to write your answer down. And then he said, put it in your desk. And then whenever you get done with your 2-week decision-making process on that very simple decision, I want you to come back and I want you to look at that piece of paper and just write several of them down. So I did. I wrote about 10 down and I let it sit in there and it came back about 2 weeks later and I was like, oh, here's the decision I made. Here, I acted quick on this. This is what I did. This is what I did. I didn't act on this one, but I did make that. And it was amazing because I think 9 out of 10 things that you challenged me to write down, I ended up making the same decision. But I may have missed an opportunity for the organization, for my team, or my leadership.
Yeah, love that.
Because I didn't act quick enough. Not hastily, because I have a process. I need to improve it. And that has dramatically changed the way that I look at things and try to act, right? You got to cause yourself to be able to make a decision to create momentum. So I wanted to share that because you did that years ago.
I remember doing that, but I'd forgotten that exercise. I need to take my own medicine right
here.
So
Mark, I have some advice for you. Mark, if you would go get that drawer, and I'm going to be a little more dramatic, when you take 2 months later and you finally make the decision. I'm just kidding. But man, what a great opportunity to talk about momentum. So
yeah, and speaking of acting and investing in yourself and creating some momentum, I talked about exchange. I really do want all the podcast family to go check that out. You will love it. That website is maxwellleadership.com/exchange. It's in the show notes. The other thing, some of you will look at that and say, hey, that's not for me yet. It's going to become a bucket list for you. Okay, put it as a bucket list. I want my podcast family there. But some of you can right now, you can invest $99 in yourself. And we have a product there that is designed just for your growth. It's a digital product. It's normally $499. We're making it available because I'm telling you, it's a momentum maker, and you need to not just listen to the content, you need to act out the content. It's 15 Laws of Growth. You'll see it there. It's a special for our podcast family, and I want you to take advantage of that. Look in the show notes. I want to close today with John. John was listening to the podcast, How to Lead in Difficult Times. And he said, thanks for the powerful episode. It's very relevant on many fronts. Going through crisis with one of my team members, and I was able to share this with them and keep inspiring them to hope. And all I want to say to this, John, is one, thank you for the feedback. We value it. But I'm going to say to the rest of us, how many of the rest of us need to take this podcast and get one of our teammates or whole members of our team to listen to the podcast and sit down and discuss it and inspire one another? The reason I want you to do that is because everyone deserves to be led well.
Are you ready to elevate your leadership to new heights? Join the movement towards High Road Leadership with John C. Maxwell's latest book. In High Road Leadership, John explores the power of valuing all people, doing the right things for the right reasons, and placing others above personal agendas. Learn how to inspire positive change and bring people together in a world that divides. Order now and receive exclusive bonuses, including a keynote on High Road Leadership by John Maxwell himself and a sneak peek into 3 impactful chapters. Take the first step towards becoming a High Road leader. Visit highroadleadershipbook.com to order your copy today.